Thank you so much, Brother Marwan and David and RBC for putting this kind of forum together. It is what we lack in the country, of which we have such free opinions, of which we can ask our leaders and our historical leaders whatever we think is right. Since we are having an open-ended kind of discussions, of which our questions are more of generic than specific, mine would be of a commentary and then questions in it. First, what I want to say is how personality cult contributed to lordism, impunity, and corruption in South Sudan. And what we are seeing, or what we are witnessing in South Sudan, we start with the tragedy of Africa, transitioning from territorial states to a republic, or building a nation or the state. What we have as a people, especially in particular as Nilotics, our issue, of which Comrade Pagan has dwelt a lot discussing, of which he was a typical part of it as well as part of the system. We started with personality cult, of which individuals became more important than the movement itself, than even the process of liberation itself. So what we are seeing in South Sudan, why we have lots of subjects, people who see themselves semi-gods, or people who think they have the authority ordained by God and they can behave the way they're behaving. This was built in the fabric of SPLA, in the psychic of SPLM as a revolutionary movement, when all infrastructure, traditional institutions were all abolished and impunity started on. So we are seeing a process which has been building for the last nearly 40 years of liberation struggle, which has now eventually culminated in what we are seeing in South Sudan. So why we have corruptions? Because our leaders, the current SPLM as a party ruling, people see themselves more important, the leaders see themselves more important than the subjects, than the people that are ruling, because they have already destroyed the infrastructure, the fabric, what held the community together. For example, the question of Upper Nile, of what is happening in Malakal and around there, between the Jiang of Upadang and then the Sholo people of Sholo Kingdom. All these rhetorics came about when individuals became more important than the movement itself. So if we think, like, for example, we could say, the ideals of the SPLM was Comrade Pagan, because he was the SG of the movement at the times. And some of the infantry or the then foot soldiers like us, who were just merely in the Red Army, we can never be part of any say of how wrong or where the movement is leading to. So when we are talking of currently keys, what the president is doing, it is something different. But this is from the mindset, the mentality, which was built. That's why when you say this is wrong, then you would automatically be killed. And that's what is killing people in Juba with unknown gunmen. It is just a simple opinions. You write an article or you say your own opinion that this is wrong, or that there's massive corruption, or the constitution written then wasn't about us. And Comrade Pagan remember well when we were in the second SPL National Convention in 2008. This was the tug of war of which the people you were leading when as the SG, and then the president, and there was kind of more of a coalition at the times. So already South Sudan was set to failure at the times, at the failure of the leaders to truly have honest opinions. Some want to be more lords than the others. Some wanted to be the people only sang by our people. So this is what has created this. And the two states, territorial states, it is a state of which in character, it's theocratic in character, of which the people are always equal. The leaders are just mere vessel or medium of communication between the gods and the higher beings. While in a republic, the state is a colonial in character, that only the ruling parties or elites are more important than the rest. And they created a semi-document, what they call constitutions, which doesn't even reflect the aspirations of the people. So that's what we are seeing, why we have these things. We cannot build an ideal state, or the way, for example, what all this that we are saying are idealistic to be true. But one thing is sure, it is the failure of the monster that was built by the people, of which Comrade Pagan was one part of that movement at the times, and now left the real monster in the name of our government that is supposed to be the government of the people. What they are doing, especially the massive corruption that we are seeing, it started right in the SPLM as an organization which had no accountability to the people whatsoever, and now in the cabinet, in the government. And when you say it, everything is militarized, and they have followers of which will never listen to the voice of reasons. They will never ask you, why are you saying this? What they will do is take out the guns and shoot you on the spot. So we must all be responsible, even those of us who have not had leadership in this particular movement, in this particular government. We must all be responsible for our individuals' actions at the community level that we have also failed. So when Comrade Pagan is talking, he must at least be optimistic and also take the responsibility as a leader that his own making as a SG and failure to implement the virus document, the SPLM manifesto and the SPLM constitutions and the visions and movement statements, all those ones which would have defined the country. We failed from the start. That's why, and later on they wrote the constitution, and this is not just a mere work of General Kiir as the president. The constitution was written by them, the SPLM members, and they wanted to vest all the powers of the country into the SPLM. That only the right person, the Lords, would be the chairman of the party, and this is what is true. So if we are to ask, what exactly are we to do, like the way Comrade Pagan has talked a lot about youth and responsibilities of individuals. First of all, we must understand the transition from the traditional system of which majority, 99% of our people are still anchored in, while the 1% or less than 1% is now thinking of modernizing, when actually they have taken away all the powers from the community. Agriculture is neglected and billions of dollars is taken. And it is only when somebody is out of the system, that's when you can make a good commentary. Like now Comrade Pagan is in exile, and they are determined, of course, if he comes to South Sudan, they will do whatever they have always done, like what they did to them earlier on. So everybody, whether armed to struggle, the groups splinter groups of Pagan and other SPLM-IO group that are still out, or Gerald Thomas, all these individuals are not truly the angels that we were waiting for, because they were part of the SPLM, and it is within the SPLM, when they fail to have won over the people, they have not shared the resources equally. That's why all this split is coming, and it is tragic, especially the scandals that is happening. Of course, Comrade Pagan has been out for long, but the way SPLM party and the president and the cabinet, the way they're doing it, it is a true looting. Our people are being truly, everything is being taken away from them. So my question is, how idealistically would you really say any other insurrections or civil protests that can go out onto the streets, or few individuals taking up arms cannot be treated like all other armed resistance that we have seen for the last 7 years, since 2013 or earlier than that. So how can our people be so suicidal again? Can we allow our people to go out again to be slaughtered on this? Or should we approach the way some other organizations are approaching it? So what is the best way forward? Because I see until when individuals like you and few individuals now in the SPLM, like the way Comrade Kwalmanyang was coming out the other time, with as well, silently, and perhaps even Pagan, they are saying the same thing, that we are corrupt. Yet still they are not doing anything that can truly tell our people, especially our communities, that you are wrong in what you individuals are doing. You have destroyed the country the way it is. And now you are coming back to be the people who would want to really rectify it, what you did earlier on. So I will end my question here, but let's look at it again and see this transitioning, not the successive peace that you signed, but from territorial state that recognize every individual, every tribal boundary into modern states, which is a republic, which nullifies everything. And that's why oil fields or whatever areas is being controlled by, or gold fields in Western Eastern Equatoria is being controlled by a state, what I would call mafias and oligarchs, not the community or not even the government. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lem, for your comments and your question.
Mr. Lam, or Comrade Lam, was proceeding from what I see as erroneous basis when he talked of that the SPLM developed a personality cult which led to warlordism. I disagree with this notion. The SPLM as an organization, and he was a member of it, was an organization composed of volunteers. And the most important principle around which the SPLM was organized was the principle of self-sacrifice and self-denial, to be ready to die for the cause of our people. And to this effect, the SPLM as an organization has sacrificed or has offered tens of thousands of its members stepping forward to give their lives and died for this country, for us to be free. That is the core principle of the organization of SPLM, around which we evolved, around which we waged battled, we lived, and that is key. It was not personality cult. And if personality cult have developed and warlordism have developed, these were developing against this very principle itself. And yes, there were cases of warlordism, there were cases of personality cult. But the most important organizing principle in the SPLM struggle has been that of self-sacrifice, and that is what made the SPLM achieve what it has achieved, of dictating terms and the will of our people on the adversaries of SPLM and of the people of South Sudan, and dictated our will precisely because of that, transforming this sacrifice in the military field on the table of negotiations, and took the form of the peace agreement. Again, after we signed the peace agreement, our founding leader, Dr. John Garang de Mabior, defined the period after the war as a payback time to the people. Now we have achieved the freedom, and we were becoming a state, and therefore we need to deliver to the people the services that they were expecting in terms of social services like education, health, clean water, and then economic development in terms of supporting the growth of agriculture, as Mr. Alam has mentioned. And these are covered in the SPLM strategy of transition from war to peace. The second point is that to say that only when somebody is out of the system, that is when they can talk, or when you talk, when you are out of the system. This, I think, is missing a very important stage. And I give you my example. I was the Secretary-General. I criticized the leadership, and I said there are mistakes that are being committed. There is need to correct those mistakes. There is need to fight corruption genuinely, and not to use corruption as a tool for political gain or power, but rather to really protect the resources and use the resources for the purposes that they are budgeted for. And I was Secretary-General. What landed me into house arrest and into the denial of my rights of freedom of speech was what? Because I was criticizing the SPLM, and people were saying, why are you criticizing the SPLM leadership when you are the Secretary-General? And I answered that question, that precisely it is the duty of a member of SPLM to criticize this organization if it is doing things wrongly. And I'm a member, and I'm a leading member in the SPLM. When I see things being done wrong, there is need to correct them. Mind you, I only talk to the public or to the media after very long period of engaging with the chairman of the party and the president of the country, and many people can attest to that. So actually, as he said precisely, because of the dictatorship that President Kiir developed, to the point that when, as he mentioned, and I'm sure he was referring to people like journalist Abraham, who wrote a number of articles criticizing the leadership of SPLM, and he was assassinated. When I was speaking, criticizing the leadership of SPLM, including warning against taking the country to war in 2013, I was arrested and almost I lost my life. It is because of that. So he cannot say that only we talk when we are out of the system or out of the country. No, we have been talking right there, and talking right to the face of President Kiir as the chairman of the SPLM and also as the president. And that is the attempt. Even let us take the 2013 war. 2013 war was was to silence dissent within the SPLM itself by President Kiir. When we were criticizing, when we were saying there is massive corruption happening, the president is forming a private army, and that is illegal, and it is also wrong to try to take the country to war. We were against war. And we were arrested, we were detained to silence us because we were calling for democratization of SPLM. We were calling for correction of mistakes in the SPLM. How can Lem skip this reality? Now, when we were arrested and when we were taken to court accused of treason because we were speaking the truth, which is now today, everybody, including himself, is agreeing that these are wrong things that are taking place. So I do not agree with that. And this is really, the truth is to the contrary. There are people who have been speaking, there are people who have been writing, and he is right to say that when you speak out in a situation like South Sudan, which is a violent dictatorship, you risk your life. And many journalists lost their lives, and because of that, and many other opponents also lost their life in mysterious ways, precisely because they were speaking out. Some were part of the system, some were outside the system, but they were speaking out in the country. Now, to try to assume a collective responsibility for the mistakes and the corruption that have happened, this is a nice way to try to mobilize for a solution to the problem. But when you are together, you say there are mistakes that are being committed. We know who are those committing mistakes. Not everybody committing these mistakes. Like he himself, if he says that he assumed responsibility for this will be just solidarity, just for being a member. But he is not part of those who have committed those mistakes. And they are continuing up to today. As he said, I was out of the country and out of the system for a very long time. And the things we were saying back in 2012, 2011, 2013 are massive today. And actually, corruption did not start in the SPLM. The corruption started in the government. And let me give you the first case of corruption, and it was the contract and a loan taken, brought by a company called Ayat to build a road from Meram to Awil. That was the first case of corruption. And actually, the deputy governor of the central bank, led Elijah Malok, opposed this and tried to stop this corrupt deal. But the president threatened him and even threatened to arrest him, and wrote a letter to President Bashir to arrest Elijah Malok, accusing him of having stolen money. It was the governor of the banks, Dr. Sabir, who alerted President Bashir that this is not true. Elijah Malok is a very clean person. He did not engage in any corruption, but he was trying to stop a case of corruption, which President Kiir was supporting and pursuing, and he benefited from it himself. He got the first kickback in the history of South Sudan, and that was $28.8 million. This is a fact. You can go back to the documents. There are many witnesses to this, and this case has even been brought to the parliament, and it was reviewed hushly because the fingers were pointing very clearly to President Kiir, and nobody wanted to have the courage to confront this. That was the first case of corruption. And it followed with many other cases, and most of them around President Kiir himself, including his participation in the Dura saga, his participation in allocating road contracts to his own company, ABMC, and so forth, which continues up to today as we speak. As we speak, President Kiir is allocating to his own companies huge contracts worth billions of dollars without bidding. And he decides how much a kilometer costs. And he's making a huge loot out of every kilometer, more than the cost of the road itself. These are facts. You cannot just brush them over or just say, oh, you blame the whole government, which has been the tactics of President Kiir. Every time he will accuse his own government of corruption when he is actually the one engaging in massive corruption himself. These are facts. Just like now, look at the road to Bahr Ghazal and the road to Bor or the road to Nadapal. All these are allocated to his own companies. And he is the one who engineered them. He is the one who approved this contract without any bidding, without any technical studies, without the involvement of the Ministry of Transport, Roads and Transport, or Roads and Bridges. No involvement. They were involved after the fact. These are realities. Not in the past, today as we speak. Then he engages in corruption in his own office. Then he arrests and accuses his own staff, take them to court, release them, and reward some of them for having silent and covering him up. Just like what he did with the road to Bahr Ghazal. Now, if Minister of Foreign Affairs Meigu was the Minister of Presidential Affairs, was the one who was corrupt and responsible for this, why would you bring him back? Why have you not investigated him? The truth is that this is done by President Kiir, and he uses Meik as a scapegoat. That is it. It should not deceive any South Sudanese. People should not be gullible to the point of just being carried away by just simple statements like that. That is what we are talking about, this destructive type of corruption, which is being carried out by the head of the state himself. Look at the recent scandal of $650 million to be paid with a sovereign guarantee issued by the Bank of South Sudan under President Kiir directives. Then the World Bank, the IMF complains about this if they are taking $650 million and they come around to ask for $300 million loan. Why would they not use that money? I'm sure some of you or all of you have read the investigative journalist piece about it, in which those businessmen were saying that President Kiir cannot and will not stop this because he is getting 200 million himself out of that money. Imagine. This is just now. Who in South Sudan is engaged in such a massive type of corruption other than President Kiir? Nobody. Then when he came from China, what did he say? He said he has found a solution to corruption. Because in South Sudan, and he used the word, he said in Arabic that who liga mushkila bta corruption, who hasa هيجيب شركات بتاع الصين يجي يبني الطرق ونينا نديهم بترول 100,000 وبعدك حولوا له بقى 30,000 برميل يوميا. ده طلع شركات بتاعه. in partnership مع شركات صينية أو مؤجرين مشغلين MDs يكونوا صينيين عشان يغش ناس. These are facts. حاجات قاعد يحصل الليلة ده ما حاجة مدسوس. Look at the exemptions from customs and taxation لشركات بتاعه to the tune of billions of dollars, $25 billion over a period of years. This is stealing from the revenue that the government was going to collect to pay the salaries of people, to build schools, to build clinics. And this is a broad daylight looting. This is the type of corruptions we are talking about. So the state, our state, is actually captured by kleptocrats, by people who are greedy and only thinking about making money for what I don't know, but thinking of looting the resources from the country. They have no any other program other than protecting the loot and killing the people if you talk against that. This cannot be something that you blame the SPLM for. It is actually done against the SPLM. This cannot be something that we can take responsibility for, all of us. The only responsibility we take is we have failed to prevent that as SPLM. And the SPLM has been hijacked, the state has been hijacked. These are realities of today as we speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Pagan.
Question one comes from Mohammed Martin, Mohammed Rock. And the question says, since you left the country, Comrade Pagan, South Sudan, people have been appointed in the position of Secretary-General of the SPLM as acting Secretary-Generals. The question is, doesn't that indicate that President Kiir still recognizes you and still hopes that when you come back, you take your position as the Secretary-General of the SPLM? That was the question.
Well, It is true that a number of cadres have been appointed as acting Secretary-General, especially after I returned to Juba in 2015, and I was reinstated as Secretary-General of the SPLM. Yes, it may mean that President Kiir still considers me as the Secretary-General, and only that absent, therefore he was appointing people to act as Secretary-General. Will it mean that President Kiir is hoping that I will return to assume that position of the Secretary-General? The Secretary-General? I doubt that this is the case. This is just a political gimmick by President Kiir, because essentially President Kiir is the one who blocked and obstructed the implementation of Arusha reunification agreement, an agreement that we negotiated and signed and agreed to reunite the SPLM on the basis of returning to the vision of SPLM, to the program of SPLM, and to the agenda of SPLM. But the way things went and the way President Kiir obstructed the implementation of the Arusha reunification agreement was that President Kiir, first and foremost, is not interested to return to the vision of SPLM. President Kiir is not ready to see the SPLM as the ruling party because he has marginalized it and excluded it from decision making in terms of policies and guidance of the government. President Kiir has been acting on his own as a dictator. He has been imposing his own agenda, which is an agenda of despotism, an agenda of looting the resources, an agenda of no development, an agenda of no service delivery to the people. And he has sought to bring in his allies from the National Congress Party, with whom he has been ruling, and basically the rule is that of capturing the state and looting the resources of the country. There is nothing more that they are delivering to the country, and therefore this is not the SPLM that we struggled under and for. The agenda that is ruling today is an agenda of destruction. It is alien to the SPLM political program or vision, and therefore I do not see the so-called SPLM in government as the real SPLM in which an organization in which we struggle, and an organization in which has delivered the independence of South Sudan, which has struggled and sacrificed tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of its loyal and committed members to achieve these goals. So that is a different organization altogether. What President Kiir has done is to hijack the leadership of SPLM and destroy the SPLM itself, use only the name, but commit grave atrocities against our people, using the name of SPLM, destroying and tarnishing the image of the SPLM, to the point that the SPLM today, because of the policies pursued by President Kiir, is seen as the organization, even though that liberated the country, but it is the organization that has destroyed the SPLM. That is not the SPLM. destroyed the country. I mean, that is not the SPLM that was led by John Garang. That is not the SPLM, which was an organization of committed freedom fighters fighting for the people, sacrificing themselves, and doing everything, shedding blood and sweat to liberate this country for the people and to serve the people. SPLM members essentially are servants of the people, loyal and committed servants of the people, ready to die for this country. They have been dying for this country. And when now it is time to govern, the SPLM was supposed to be an organization that is ready to work very hard, even die on their job for the people. Building schools, building hospitals, building roads, building institutions, and empowering people and uniting people, building a nation out of our 64 tribes, building a nation out of the members of all these communities and transforming them into conscious citizens with rights and duties and with a sense of belonging to this country. Because of the destruction of SPLM and only the name that is left, and President Kiir is ruling not as an SPLM leader, not as an SPLM member, not even as he was during the struggle. The President Kiir we have today is a totally different human being, doing things that are contrary to his own history himself. So he has migrated maybe to the NCP or to totally a different agenda. Therefore, that is not the SPLM that we belong to. And I cannot be a Secretary-General of such an organization. It is an organization just for the looting. If I wanted to be part of the group that is looting, fine, I would have been there. But that is not what we are here for. That is not what we want to spend the few years left for us to live on this earth. We want to be building a country and living a country that is peaceful, prosperous, for prosperity for the next generation.
Thank you very much. Comrade Pagan, for that comprehensive answer to our viewers' question. I think there's another question from one of our viewers before we move to Brother Mabur's own question. So, Brother Mabur, another question from a viewer.
Yep. The second question from our viewers is from Piot Bol. He says, regarding your call for putting the country under the UN trusteeship, using the presidents of East Timor, he also says there is a difference between South Sudan, because South Sudan and East Timor, because South Sudan was an independent sovereign country when you call for the UN trusteeship on it, but East Timor was not independent when it was put under the UN trusteeship. So what is your comment on that?
Actually, the Timor-Leste Liberation front had declared independence with the withdrawal of Portugal from East Timor, and therefore they were independent. Then Indonesia intervened, and they had a war that erupted. Then Indonesia withdrew, and East Timor became independent. But then a civil war erupted in East Timor, which led to the call by the region to put East Timor under a trusteeship for 2 years to stabilize East Timor and organize free and fair election. And indeed, it was a successful mission. And East Timor became stable, and they conducted elections which were won by the Liberation Front. And the country since then became stable, and they have been progressing very well. They have literally become out of news because there were no crises. But East Timor began to achieve rapid development in the region, and that is what is happening. The mission to stabilize the UN trusteeship as a mission to stabilize the country after the devastating civil war was very successful, and it only took 2 years. The crisis was over, and the elected government took over the reins of the country. And since then, they have been independent and developing peacefully. But let me also give to the viewer or the gentleman who asked the question, Piot Bol, that Cambodia was an independent country, but because the regime of Pol Pot took the country through genocide, a very devastating genocide, and massive instability, and the country was terribly divided, and it collapsed. The United Nations established a trusteeship in Cambodia and returned the country to stability. They conducted the election, and the UN withdrew from there, and the country leadership and sovereignty was assumed by the Cambodians after their election, when they elected their government. So even in the case of a fully established country, independent and sovereign country like Cambodia, there was a trusteeship for a period of time. But even if we come back to Africa, there were different forms of international administration helping a country that is in difficulties, like Liberia or Sierra Leone. There were UN missions there, and supporting a transitional government that led to stabilization of the countries, and almost like a rebooting of the two states in West Africa. And this resulted into rapid transition to stability and democracy in these two countries in Africa. So they were independent countries, but they were destroyed by war, like in the case of South Sudan. And therefore, the situation in South Sudan in 2015, when I called for a trusteeship, if we can think out of the box and critically and in the interest of the country, at that time, war was raging. The parties to the conflict, particularly the government of President Kiir, were not ready. and not interested in peace. And therefore, they were delaying. And even in the end, when we came to sign the peace agreement, President Kiir refused to sign. Later on, he was pressured to sign. He signed. And immediately, the same day he signed that agreement, he started to campaign against that agreement, that it was not a good agreement. And this has become the problem of South Sudan, with instability continuing up to today. From 2015, we are in 2021. This is 6 years of missed opportunities, 6 years of displacement, 6 years of destruction in the country, 6 years of death in the country, 6 years of hunger, 6 years of South Sudanese being victims of floods without a government that can be there. What does the current government of South Sudan deliver to the citizen of South Sudan? Nothing. No education, no health, no any development, no humanitarian assistance, but even the government is obstructing humanitarian assistance, this type of government. Is this the sovereignty that we fought for? Definitely not. And therefore, the call to reboot the country, the call for us to establish a government of technocrats supported by the international community, even today as we speak, probably is the only solution that we have to stabilize the country and take the country through a short transitional period that will take us in transition to peace and to democracy. This is the noble goals behind the proposal. As a freedom fighter, nobody can blackmail me to say that I want South Sudan to be colonized, as some people would say, or that I want us to lose our sovereignty. No, actually, what we are concerned about is that we may actually lose the very state of South Sudan by collapsing into chaos and disorder as a result of the policies being pursued by the current government of President Kiir. And if South Sudan disintegrates into chaos, we will not have a state, we will not have sovereignty by that time. It will be a lawless territory. How much of South Sudan is outside the control of the government that claims to be exercising sovereignty today? How much of South Sudan? What is the sovereignty being used for? Is it serving the people? Is it bringing development? Is it bringing us back our dignity? Is it achieving our dream of a peaceful, free, and prosperous country? Definitely not. These are the issues. These are the issues of concern of a nationalist. And we should not be thinking of trusteeship as if we are losing our independence and sovereignty, but rather we are working to regain it. Because it is a matter of a short period, and then hand the power back to the people for the people to elect their government. And when the people elect their government, they assume control of the situation. That is the end of the presence of the international community, unless they are required by that government to continue assisting in one way or another. That is really the ideas behind the proposal I made in 2015 or 2014 initially, but then again I repeated it in 2015.
Thank you so much, Comrade Pagan, for that comprehensive answer to the last of our questions. We really thank you for all the time that you have committed to us and to help us and enable RBC to continue to be the platform where we invite all our people to share their thoughts about our vision for the country. Of course, this is not going to be the end of the debate. You've said some very, very important things, some of it accusative of others who are not here to defend themselves today. But that's the nature of things. Hopefully, others will come in to verify, support, or contradict what you have said. But this has been an enormous contribution to the debate and discussion about all the bad doings that have been happening in our country, including the tragic suffering that's continuing to our people today. Thank you so much, Comrade Pagan Amum, for the time you've given us.
Thank you very much. Well, in conclusion, I would like to reiterate the fact that our country is going through a very deep national crisis, mainly because of lack of a nation and a state building project. And essentially, it is a crisis of failure of leadership. Our top leadership has failed because it has no any clear vision of where it wants to take the country to. And as it's been always said, that a blind person cannot lead people to safety or out of problems. There is need for clarity, there is need for a vision to get out from this. Because of lack of vision, a vacuum has been created which actually resulted into the state, our young state, being captured by greed, people with greed, to loot resources and not to develop the country. And this in turn led to instability, to wars, to displacement, to massive human rights violation, including committing of crimes against humanity. And our country today has been going through transition. From the first transition to the present time, we are in one transition, failed transition, to another, and prospects for peace and transition to democracy are getting remote every time. Therefore, the only way out, in my view, is for South Sudanese stakeholders to come together and through consensus develop a transitional program that will take the country out of the present crisis and instability. And I believe the most important cornerstone for this transitional program would be the establishment of a transitional government of technocrats that will be able to win back the trust and the confidence of the international community to come to support South Sudanese in this difficult time. A transitional technocratic government that will be neutral and agreeing for the political parties to step aside to organize themselves for the elections that will be conducted at the end of the transition. That is one proposal. But more importantly, use the transitional period for South Sudanese to develop a clear vision for the country, develop a very clear national and democratic state building project so that we can build our state. It is definitely going to be from the scratch. And then a nation building project so that we are clear how do we manage our diversities, how do we transform members of our various tribes to become equal citizens of South Sudan, citizens that have the sense of belonging to South Sudan and sense of allegiance to South Sudan. For us to be able to see ourselves as compatriots rather than members of rivaling tribal groups at each other's throats every time, like the case now. This, I believe, is the only way to rescue the country from collapsing into chaos and disorder. And this, I believe, is the only way to restore the confidence and the trust in South Sudan itself. As a nation, we struggle for from generation to generation, and a nation that we have put all our hopes and dreams. We had hoped to have a nation and a motherland, a homeland in which we all will be united, living in peace and harmony. This, I believe, is the way forward for us. It is not too late, but definitely there is need for change. The situation as it is now, the current situation, cannot be tolerated by our people for any longer. Our people, you can see, are voting out of their homes. They are increasingly becoming irritated to seek refuge outside the country, and they feel that the country is not supporting them, especially with all the difficulties that are happening, including to manage this disastrous climate change leading to floods and droughts in our country. So I'm hopeful that South Sudan will be free, peaceful, and prosperous. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hon Pagan Amum.